Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Tuesday's edition of Alaska Weather. 1 week into September now of 2021. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, hosting today's show. Up first, hazardous weather graphics. There are no advisories, no watches, no warnings out anywhere around the state for the next day or so. And from there, we'll move right on into satellite imagery. You can see pretty snappy storm moved up off the southeast coast today with kind of frontline north-south orientation there, but a little bit more of a wind than rain producer with Ketchikan seeing a peak wind gust today of 45 miles an hour at the south and southeast, while Cape Decision had gusts over 50 miles per hour, and Heidelberg had a peak wind gust of 60 miles per hour earlier this afternoon. But rainfall amounts, not all that impressive. Let's see, Cake picked up a quarter of an inch of precipitation, but Hoonah had about a half inch. Those are the two heavier rainfall amounts down there. Clouds, but not much in the way of precipitation over the northern panhandle. And then some breaks there, eastern North Gulf Coast through the Copper River Basin, and temperatures rising in the mid-60s this afternoon. Northway, Tok, also northward to Chicken there. And lower 60s Copper River Basin there, especially central eastern areas. Also lower 60s, just mid and high level clouds coming into the Cook Inlet area. Anchorage, Kenai Peninsula seeing some lower 60s at mid-afternoon, as well as the Susitna Valley. But heavier rain up to the north there with the southerly flow rolling this through again. You can see south to north flow, of course, the upslope areas of the southern Brooks Range picking up the heavier amounts, with Coldfoot, for example, picking up about 4/10 of an inch of precipitation. Indian Springs, or not Indian Springs, I think in Nevada. Indian Mountain there had about 4/10 of an inch of precipitation too, those 12-hour amounts. Koyak, there in Norton Bay, about half an inch of precipitation. And then lighter amounts down into the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, both St. Mary's and Bethel, had quarter of an inch of rain, so kind of a widespread area of rain with the southwest flow coming in off the Bering Sea, and surges of moisture kind of moving onshore and then slowing up as they move inland and taking a turn to the north there, so that kind of feeds the moisture right up to the south side of the Brooks Range there. Otherwise, you can see frontal boundary with enhanced clouds over the central Aleutians, bringing some rain into the central Aleutians there around Adak, and then low clouds, fog, and drizzle. A few hundredths of an inch of rain falling there with the clouds over the Pribilof Island area. So pretty cloudy over the Bering Sea, but some increasing breaks back to the west and then the northwest. On the chart today, you can see one low there up just west of Point Hope. And southwest winds, pretty gusty. St. Lawrence Island into the Bering Strait. Let's see, gusts 40 to 45 miles an hour there. Gamble, also at Tin City. And then winds diminish as you head over toward Nome and White Mountain area, down to gusts 30 and then 25 miles an hour. I think 25 to 30 mile an hour winds, Kotzebue. And then the heavier rain there south side of the central and western Brooks Range. Much lighter amounts to the north, but some light rain did fall over the western north slope and the central and western Arctic coast as well, associated with that warm front. And then the low already weakening there as it drifts northward slowly off the panhandle, but pretty sunny skies you can see from the Yukon Valley, kind of low clouds in over the Yukon Flats there, especially earlier on today. And for tonight, variably cloudy eastern interior. That trough moves eastward, brings a chance of showers into the Kuskokwim Valley, actually from Bristol Bay, and that kind of links up with some moisture there sliding into western central Kodiak Island and Shelikof Strait, maybe reaching the state airport there, but Fognak Island northward should stay dry with increasing clouds, Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley, Kenai Peninsula, but dry again over the eastern interior, dry for the north slope and the Arctic coast with downsloping off the Brooks Range, especially on the west side there, that low tracking northward. will keep it wet over the Noatak Valley, maybe down toward Kiana. And then that next trough keeps the showers and rain and fog and drizzle going along the west coast. And back to the Pribilofs. Next system starting to move up, just comes onto the map there, 994 millibar low south of Atka, and that brings rain into the Fox Islands and west central Aleutian areas. Another low there over the northwest Bering Sea. And for tomorrow, we'll see the low in the Pacific definitely becomes a dominant feature, while the one over the northwest Bering is only moving slowly and remains weak, just bringing a chance of rain to St. Lawrence Island. And the rainfall staying north of the Aleutian, so it could be some clearing. Could be a partly sunny day, maybe mostly sunny for Adak and Atka tomorrow, with dry conditions back toward Shimia, and then you get into the rain again on the Komodorsky Islands. But gale force winds and rain becoming heavy at times on the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula there, and some of that moisture slipping on up into Kodiak, linking up with the leftover moisture, and unsettled, cloudy, showery, with areas of light rain, fog, and drizzle mainly along the coastal areas of the western, with just scattered showers ending over the central interior. Looks mostly sunny for the Arctic coast, central and eastern Arctic coast, north slope, all the way down Prince William Sound, Susitna Valley, Manuska Valley, although seeing increasing clouds there, Cook Inlet, with the chance of rain moving in. Areas of light rain possible, maybe from Kachemak Bay up to possibly Soldotna Kenai, back to the western Alaska Range. And then periods of rain over the southern panhandle with south to north flow coming over a ridge of high pressure over British Columbia. And then taking a look at the Thursday outlook, 980 millibar low with a pretty tight gradient there, pressure field right across Kodiak Island, good for good gale force winds there up to the North Gulf Coast as well. And Cook Inlet will see an increase in the winds, small craft advisories in the forecast for Prince William Sound and southern Cook Inlet, with rain heavy at times Kodiak Island, drying out, high pressure ahead of that system, but lingering showers over the east or toward the eastern border of the southeast coast, mostly sunny along the coast. Dry and partly mostly sunny eastern Copper River Basin into the eastern interior, dry for the north slope and the Arctic coast, low clouds and fog possible there. Next system spreads rain into the Pribilofs. Lows tonight, mid-30s, Copper River Basin, maybe even down to near 30 in the higher valleys there. Otherwise in the 40s everywhere else, near 50 in some locations of the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow, 55 to 60 for the southeast coast, 60, 65 Copper River Basin. Mid to upper 50s, Kodiak Island, south central Alaska, Kuskokwim Valley, Bristol Bay. Lows on Thursday morning. A little milder there for the Copper River Basin. Otherwise 45 to 50 everywhere else. Lower 50s though for Kodiak Island, 45 to 50 in the Panhandle, followed by highs Thursday afternoon. Upper 50s to lower 60s about sums it up everywhere in these locations. Staying in the 50s though for Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, the Kenai Peninsula. Prince William Sound up north, lows either side of 40 for the Arctic coast and north slope, but probably into the 30s there for the Brooks Range. South of the mountains, 40s. From the Bering Strait eastward. And then tomorrow, much like today, mid-60s over the eastern interior from Eagle down to Northway, Tok, Chicken. Mid-60s also for Fairbanks area, otherwise in the 50s, mid to upper 40s for the Arctic coast, followed by lows only in the upper 30s or in the 30s for the north slope and the Arctic coast. Milder west though, 40s for the area south of the Brooks Range. Highs really nice into the mid, maybe upper 60s, central upper Tanana Valley areas, 40-mile country, near 60 for Ambler, but 50s for Nome in the Seward Peninsula. Out southwest, lows in the upper 40s both nights, highs in the 50s both days, Wednesday and Thursday.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on, first line weather graphic. Nothing but VFR for the north slope and the Arctic coast tomorrow, but that's because all the IFR is banked up on the southern slopes of the Brooks Range. IFR also southern Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, southward, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, Togiak Bay to Dillingham, southern and central Kuskokwim Valley, give or take, and down to the Pribilofs, and from Atka to Unalaska and Nunavak Islands, all IFR, marginal VFR out to the west, marginal VFR for the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, Western Alaska Range, VFR, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, northward there, up to the Brooks Range, IFR Southern Southeast Coast, marginal VFR there for the Northern Panhandle. And from there, taking a look at the afternoon forecast for Wednesday, we've got a VFR pattern in the east, and north of the Brooks Range, the Arctic coast, marginal VFR pattern to the west, with some lingering IFR lingering there from the Bering Strait across St. Lawrence Island, St. Matthew Island, and near Adak, more IFR, Alaska Peninsula, and south coast of the Panhandle, otherwise marginal VFR for North Gulf Coast, Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, trying to increase into the Matanuska Valley, the part of the Susitna Valley westward, and then for the morning Thursday, VFR in the interior, especially the east side. VFR continues north of the Alaska Range, North Slope, most of the Arctic coast, except for right there at the central coast. Some possible marginal VFR, otherwise looking good. That's just a chance. And IFR again, St. Lawrence Island, Western Aleutians, small batch out there. And Kodiak Island, catching some IFR there from AKwx, Sitkinak, right on up almost to Fognak Island. Panhandle IFR, marginal VFR, Southern Alaska. Afternoon, that kind of retreats back a little bit, but holds along the Western Alaska Range and Cook Inlet, with some IFR for Kiska, Hamchitka, St. Lawrence Island. That's about it. Looks like improving out there over the Bering Sea with increasing areas of VFR, but marginal VFR still pretty widespread right into the southwest interior. Interior looking pretty good, mostly VFR. Marginal VFR, though, showing up central eastern Arctic coast, possibly. Otherwise, moving on to the passes. Anatuvik, marginal VFR, with VFR out the north entrance to the north slope, same pattern, lowest conditions north side, a little bit worse on the southern entrance. Lake Clark and Merrill, occasional marginal VFR for the day Wednesday. Same forecast goes for rainy, windy, possible trending toward marginal VFR in the southern approach throughout the afternoon. Otherwise VFR. Just call it VFR for Isabel and Mentasta. Both passes there are VFR. Tanita, VFR trending marginal in the afternoon. Portage, same forecast. VFR trending marginal probably by midday. And Chilkoot and White, occasional marginal VFR all day. Freezing levels 8,000 feet with the upper level ridge shifting eastward there, but you can see it poking up across Yakutat into the Northwest Territories. Along and south of the Aleutians, 6,000 to 14,000 feet, 10,000 feet southern panhandle. Icing could be some considerable moderate rime icing coming up to the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. Heaviest icing will stay south and slide northeastward there to your southeast and east of the panhandle. Just some mixed icing possible of the light variety. And then areas of a light to isolated moderate mixed or rime icing, mixed icing, call it here over the western interior and along the Yukon River, south central Alaska to Bristol Bay. Jet stream, cold upper lows over the Russian Far East. So we've got southwest flow 35 to 55 knots, turning more southerly there, a little bit there, mostly southwest, south-southwest up to the Arctic coast, and then stronger jet north of the western Aleutians and near Kodiak Island, and 85-knot winds cutting in across the southern panhandle. 9,000 feet, 35-knot winds, western St. Lawrence Island, 20 to 30 knots, western North Slope, 35 knots, strongest wind staying to the south of that low, just south of Unalaska Island, 3,000-foot winds, got 50 knots though, right across, 50 to 60 knots actually, right across eastern Aleutians, and about 35 knots or so out of the southeast for the Alaska Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, south 30. Turbulence-wise, could be severe there, especially for small aircraft for the Fox Islands, otherwise light to isolated, or considerable moderate chop, Alaska Peninsula, and St. Lawrence Island.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and today I'm privileged to introduce Dr. Uccellini, the Director of the United States National Weather Service. Welcome back to Alaska, sir.
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Prior to being the leader of the National Weather Service, your work included an extensive look at snowstorms across the northeastern United States. These are the types of storms that can bring some of the country's largest cities to its knees. Tell me a little bit about your fascination with snow.
Well, as far back as I can remember, I've always been interested in weather, growing up as a kid on Long Island, New York, and was particularly fascinated by snowstorms. Why they occurred, the distribution of snow was very varied across the entire region, the rain-snow line, all those things fascinated me right from the get-go. And I was interested in knowing how they worked, how the forecast worked, or more often than not, didn't work one way or the other. And that drove me, that interest continued to build and drove me through high school right into college, wanting to be a meteorologist.
Okay, that's a fascinating story, and I think every meteorologist has a weather story like that in some way.
Right.
Due to Alaska's size and proximity to the North Pole, sometimes it's difficult to detect and analyze the weather patterns over Alaska. What's the National Weather Service doing to improve that weather detection?
Well, observations in this type of environment is a big challenge, whether it's from space or from what we call in situ observations from the ground or within the systems. Clearly, satellites have been playing an increasing role in providing the big picture, not only from a visual sense in what you see is occurring, but also from providing the data for numerical models that then are used to actually predict the weather. Alaska is actually pretty well positioned with respect to polar orbiting satellites, since you get a faster return of those satellites over your particular area. And in fact, the polar satellite system is the backbone for the observations that we use in our models, especially our global models, and they're particularly important for observing weather features that affect Alaska.
Alaskans live and die by the weather every day, and one of the strategic goals of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Weather Service is to develop a more weather-ready nation. What does it mean for Alaskans to be weather-ready?
Well, the strategic outcome is based on people being ready, responsive, and therefore resilient to the increasing threats to extreme weather events. Those threats are related to not only the nature of the events, but the fact that we're becoming more vulnerable to them as we have more people, more infrastructure that could be affected by these events. So we have to ensure that the observations we make for situational awareness, the forecasts we make for people to take the proper responses, are connected to people's actions, the response to these events, so that they will be more resilient to what's facing them. You know, there are examples with respect to hurricanes. More people living along the coastline takes longer to evacuate. We have to make better forecasts with longer lead times, but we also have to communicate the threat so people will actually take action to avoid those storms. Up here you have, as in other parts of the United States, an increasing threat related to fire. As there are more people living in fire-prone areas, we have to ensure that our forecasts are good, that we don't have false alarms that make people not react to the forecast when in fact they should. But we also have to be able to communicate the threat and make sure that we're working with the partners in the emergency management community so that communities and right down to individuals will actually take the proper responses in the face of these events. So that's the strategic goal. There are a lot of challenges for us in terms of improving forecasts, but also improving our communication skills and linking with the emergency management communities that are actually out there trying to protect lives and mitigate property loss.
So a huge partnership effort going forward.
That's one of the important keys for the success of meeting the strategic goal.
Okay. One of the things you're talking about was understanding the weather information we're getting back from the computers, weather modeling, and you did a lot of work with that in some of your prior positions with the Environmental Prediction Center there, the National Center for Environmental Prediction. What can you tell us about recent improvements in that weather modeling? And you were using the polar orbiters as kind of a source of information that started that process.
Well, you know, first of all, we have to recognize that everything you see, you read and hear about weather, climate, or ocean forecasts are all driven by numerical models. Now, it really has been the revolution in our forecast process in the last part of the 20th century. The success of that numerical enterprise is based on three factors: big computers, global data, not just local data, but you have to have a global data set, and then the models themselves, the science that's behind the models and in running the models in an operational mode. So we're working to improve all three of those components. We upgraded our computers last year. We're going through another upgrade even as I speak. We'll be upgrading from 200 trillion calculations per second to 700 trillion calculations per second by January of 2015. This increase in the computer will allow us to run what we call Earth system models. It's not just the atmosphere, it's the atmosphere, ocean, ice, which is obviously very important up here, and land models that are all coupled together at higher resolution. So you need the big computers, you need the science that allows us to run these models and run them in a parallel mode, and that they're coupled so that the ocean effects could affect the atmosphere and vice versa, as an example. And then the global observations are absolutely critical, and over the last 20, 30 years they've become more dependent upon the satellite systems, and especially the polar orbiting satellites, which help drive the observations needed for those models, whether they be atmospheric observations, land, ice observations. We're deriving more and more of that from satellites now that feed into these models and produce forecasts with extended lead times. Now out, for extreme events especially, we're seeing much improved forecast out in the 4, 5, 6, 7, and even 8-day range, which gets us back to Weather Ready Nation, because if you're going to get ready for a storm event, you want those consistent forecasts approaching that event from day 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, so you can take the actions several days in advance that can help mitigate the property loss and protect your livelihood.
Okay, all part of the mission of protecting life and property. Dr. Uccellini, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and speaking to Alaskans and sharing how the National Weather Service is working for Alaska and the nation. Wish you safe travels around the 49th. Enjoy your time here, sir. And for Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Marine forecast, lighter winds there for the southern panhandle tomorrow. Westerlies on the south coast 10 to 20 knots, seas around 7 feet. North coast northwest breeze 15 knots, 6 to 7 foot seas. And for Clarence Strait, south winds 20 knots, seas 4 feet. Stevens Passage, southeast winds at 15 knots, and 10 knot winds in the forecast for Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay with pretty slight seas up there about 2 feet. Moving on to the outlook for Thursday. Winds start to pick up in the afternoon, especially on the central north coast, as southeast winds increase to 25 knots for small craft advisories, 5 to 7 foot seas. And the south coast, looking at southerly winds at 20 knots. Clarence Strait, south winds at 10 knots, seas 2 feet. Or southeast winds 10 knots, actually for the central southern inner channels. And Lynn Canal south at 10 knots. Prince William Sound for tomorrow, variable winds at 10 knots, seas 2 feet. Light variable winds for the North Gulf Coast with 4 foot seas. Northern Cook Inlet, light variable winds 10 knots or less, seas 1 foot. And southeast of 10, Southern Cook Inlet, seas a little higher there at 3 feet, and 15 knot southeast winds for the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay. Then a big increase in the winds after the relative calm before the storm. For tomorrow, we've got good gales coming into the North Gulf Coast east, coming up to 40 knots with seas building 13 to 16 feet. Small craft advisories developing. Prince William Sound as east winds increase to 25 knots. Same thing for Southern Cook Inlet, south of the Forelands, northeast at 25 knots. 30 knot winds out of the northeast for Kamishak Bay. Northern Cook Inlet, lighter winds, northeast at 20, seas 4 feet. The Barren Islands, northeast at 40. And for Wednesday, for Kodiak Island, variable winds in Chillicothe Strait, southeast coming up to 20 knots are on the east side of the island, and gale warnings from Sitkinak to Cape Sarachev. East-southeasterlies, 35 knots, seas 7 to 10 feet. Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula northeast at 30 knots, but only 15 knots for Bristol Bay out of the southeast. Those will swing around to the north for Bristol Bay on, Thursday, and seas about 4 feet. Gales, south side of the Alaska Peninsula and up the east side of Kodiak Island there, where it'd be northeast at 35 knots, and then northerlies at 40 knots, turn northwest at 40 knots from Castle Cape to Cape Sarachev. Much lighter winds on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, westerlies at 20 knots. And for the Fox Islands and Alaska Island tomorrow, north winds 30 to 45 knots with the gale warnings on the Pacific side of the islands. We're northwest 40 knots south of Unmak Island. Adak and Atka, lighter winds northwest 20 to 25 knots. Turn westerly at 20 from Chitka Island. Small craft advisories from Kiska to Shimia for southwest winds at 25 knots. And then pretty uniform wind pattern here and speed for the Aleutians all the way over to Unmak Island, southwest 25 knots from Shimia to Nikolsky. On Alaska Island, west 25 to 30 knots with 7 to 11 foot seas. And for the southwest coast, south end of Nunivak Island, southeast winds at 20 knots, seas 4 feet. And lighter winds for the Yukon Delta coast, south at 15 with 4 foot seas. Kick it up to 20 knots, St. Lawrence Island, seas about 6 feet there, and 15 knot breeze out of the south for Norton Sound. Light variable winds for the Pribilof Islands with seas around 4 feet. St. Matthew Island, southwest winds 15 knots, seas 5 feet. And for Thursday, southeast 15 for St. Lawrence Island, west-southwest 20 knots along the southwest coast and the Pribilof Islands. And up along the Arctic coast, 15 knot winds from the east-southeast on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Central coast south at 20, west side southwest 20, seas 5 feet, all the way down to Cape Thompson. Cape Thompson to Wales, east winds at 15 knots with 4 foot seas. And for the day Thursday, we've got southeast winds 15 knots, Wales to Cape Beaufort. Otherwise, the remainder of the Arctic coast, all out of the east at 20 knots with 5 to 6 foot seas. Tonight, weakening trough brings showers into the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, maybe some light rain, Kodiak Island, up into the Koyukuk Valley, dry to the east, dry for the North Slope, and weakening storm, rain, and wind diminish for the Panhandle, becoming scattered showers in the south, and then the front brings moisture into the Aleutians. And that cranks up to a pretty good storm for gale force winds. Alaska Peninsula, Eastern Aleutians tomorrow. Rain heavy at times, starting to spread into Kodiak Island. Unsettled, cloudy, showery in the west. Mostly sunny, dry in the east. And chance of rain over the southern Panhandle with showers possible in the north. And the next day begins to improve there for the southeast coast. Big storm southeast of Kodiak Island.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.